euer dreckiges Lachen vergeht, wenn ihr euer eigenes Blut fließen seht, die Waffengemeinschaft Germaniens steht, für einen Kommen ist es jetzt zu spät.
I've got one that can see.
Hoe gaat het? Welkom op de dagen van de donder. Welcome to the Days of Thunder. I am John Nada. Before we get started on today's video, there's a little bit of Dutch for those of you that are not familiar. Came to my attention that Nada Nation has now reached another country. We are being broadcast in the Netherlands. So what I would like to do at some point for my German and Nederlanders, at some point, if anybody from the listening audience from either one of those countries would like to do a one-on-one interview with John Nada on the situation in either of your respective countries, I would certainly be interested in doing thusly. Now, this is a video that I've debated on making because I don't really like, everybody's going their own way, and I don't feel like I'm calling anybody out on this, but there's been some things that have come to my attention vis-a-vis Steve Hoka, who I have mentioned on this program before, and who, to be quite honest with you, admittedly was the first Mgtow content producer that I ever was exposed to. In fact, that's how I found out about the term, and this was back in 2008. I take umbrage with some things that he has said in some of his more recent videos. There are some things that I definitely agree with Steve on. He's always talking about how he doesn't have the following that some of the other Mgtow content producers have. But then I would have to kind of take issue with him putting himself in the category of Mgtow content producer, because from what I've understood of some of his videos is that, yes, he perhaps is one of the early pioneers of Mgtow in terms of the content that's being produced. He considers himself to be TFL, or True Force Loneliness. So that's kind of the thing, is that you're not going to have the amount of subscribers that somebody like TFM or Sandman or some of the various other names he mentions are going to have, because you're not a Mgtow content producer by your own admonition. Now, if I'm wrong on that, and I will go ahead and give you credit on the fact that you, at least at one time, you were a pioneer of Mgtow. But what you've been saying is that a lot of the Mgtow content producers are using Mgtow essentially as basically a shield or a blanket, and that what's really going on is that we're all TFL, or we're all incels and all this. Steve says he doesn't have the subscribers because he alienates a lot of people with the truth. And the fact of the matter is that the truth does not draw very many people to it. The truth will always be accepted by a remnant. So in that, I say join the club, Steve, because anytime that you're speaking the truth about anything, you're not going to be very popular, and you know that as well as I do. What I feel like, okay, bringing up a point that he makes, and I made it in the last video about the infiltration of women into. He spoke of the men's rights movement. I'm not particularly a fan of the MRA movement or the MRM movement per se. I think that it has its place, but I don't see that it's accomplished very much, and it's trying to work within the framework of the gynocracy. And so, as a result, there have not been very many results out of it in terms of actually changing anything. What Steve doesn't realize, and it's a common mistake made by a lot of people, and that is that Mgtow is not in and of itself a movement, but rather a reaction. I have a video on here entitled Mgtow, It's the Only Sane Choice, because this is not a movement. I mean, I don't know of any grand Mgtow council, any chief Mgtow rabbi or whatever. All I know is that you have and again, it's not a very large percentage of men out there, but it is ever growing of men that have just simply had enough with the dating scene. Now, what many people fail to realize, again, it's a common misconception. Mgtow and the red pill is not simply about men and women and their interactions or even dating. There are many facets, many red pills, as I've said on this program. Dating happened to be one of them, but the accusation here from Mr. Hoka is that essentially what it comes down to is that Mgtow are guys that can't get laid. They're not choosing to be single, but rather are forced to be single, or rather forced to be single by circumstance, and that basically it's just like I said, it's kind of like a denial of, well, what he would say is that we are denying facts. But let me go back, because what he said about the infiltration of females into the men's rights movement, and in fact Mgtow to some degree, is dead on. Totally agree with Steve on that. I mentioned it in the last program with Karen Strawn. She's a big hit with Tradcons. She's a big hit with the alt-right. But I don't really see that she has a place in Mgtow. Who is she to inform any man as to their experience as it is in regards to dating, marriage, and all those other things? I mean, only another man could possibly know that experience. And I mean, nothing against her as a person, but I just don't really see why she's relevant. Okay, so we covered that, but this idea that we can't get laid, it's a common shaming thing that's getting thrown out there. As a matter of fact, it's actually not that difficult of a task to perform or to attain. That's just the common. It's the common tactic. Oh, you can't get laid. You're not really choosing to be single. You're using this as a security blanket type. I mean, it's a common argument. The problem, Steve is not understanding what the core root problem is. The core root problem is this: even if you win, and I guess in Steve's mind, winning is getting a girlfriend or having sex or getting married. Even if you win, all you have effectively done is placed a axe above your head that could come falling down at any time. It's like doing the bench press, and I don't know, should I do the one last rep here? Am I going to be I don't have a spotter, so should I do it? That's what he's not understanding, is that the fundamental question that Mgtow has answered. And there's a very good, and again, TFM, very great video that he did on "She Will Never Love You." Go check it out. Great. One of the Primark podcast episodes that I listened to, and it just really put it all together. The problem is not being able to get laid. The problem is not I can't get a girlfriend. The problem is, even if I get a girlfriend, even if I get married, even if I get laid, there's all these other tags associated with it that, as a guy in the gynocracy, you just can't win. Okay, so you have sex. It's an accomplishable enough feat. But with the abundance of false rape accusations, possible accidental quote-unquote pregnancies and all that, you really set yourself up for possible problems. It's a Mike Prickly, as they say. So even with marriage, let's say that you jump through all the hoops and you do all the right things, and you meet Mrs. Wonderful, and you go off to the little white chapel, and you get married. Who's to say that 10 years, 5 years, whatever the case may be, that she doesn't get bored and maybe cheat on you, and now you're cucked with a child that's not yours, or maybe she decides to divorce you, and now you're paying alimony or child support or both, and she now is taking half your earnings with the threat of, particularly with child support, the threat of prison looming over you. So, and for what? I mean, you do all this work, you put all this effort forth, and yet the only thing that you really gain are her problems, her debt. You can forget any kind of dreams that you had, because she'll be sure to kill those off. And yet Steve is saying that the problem is that we can't get laid, or that we're not really choosing to be single. He speaks of the strongman narrative. I don't speak of a strongman narrative myself. I speak of a sane man narrative, a rational man narrative. And while I do think it's true, because you have to remember, from cradle to grave, you are fed this line that you're taught certain ideas about how life should be, would be, will be, or whatever, and it comes crashing down. Like we've mentioned before, it's the whole Santa Claus narrative, where you're told from a very young age until a certain point in life that Santa Claus is real. You find out he's not. It affects you a little bit. And so, in much the same way, this idea that we were going to meet this wonderful girl, get married, have families, and do all this stuff that it appears our ancestors throughout the generations before did, to find out that that's really just smoke and mirrors and not the reality, it does irk a lot of us. It's certainly, I think, a valid point to say that a lot of us wish that it were true. A lot of us would love to meet somebody that cared and supported, cared for us and supported us the way that our own mothers did, or the way that our own family has, or even in the way that we do for ourselves, to love us and care for us the way we do ourselves, and vice versa. But the reality of it is that's not the reality. Again, many of us may want that, but that's just not the facts. And so therefore, Mgtow is the only rational choice to protect yourself legally, financially, biologically. And that is where I think he's missing the point. We're not a movement, but a reaction. Steve brings up some things. I've listened to a couple of Angry Mgtow videos, of his videos. He brings up a few other people about this doomsdayer scenario that some of these people have gotten in their mind. And I say I don't agree, I do agree with Steve on that. I don't think that we're headed towards some apocalyptic Mad Max type world. Not to say that it couldn't happen, but I think things will continue on as they have, at least for my lifetime. But Steve says he says himself he offers no solutions. That's not to say there's not a solution, though. You've got to find your own truth. It's not easy, and it's a road that we all have to walk to find what that solution is going to be. But to say that there are no solutions, I don't think is true. Steve says he doesn't offer any solutions, and I think that that's the only right thing, because not even I can really offer you solutions. All I can do is present to you the facts and the reality in the way that maybe my perspective to some extent. But the fact of the matter is that the solution is somewhere within you, and that is part of the grand thing of life, is that you have to figure out how to bring the solution out and how to incorporate that solution into the world you see before you. Just a few things I wanted to speak on. Like I said, you can't really look to any one particular Mgtow content producer. I mean, we're here with our very different experiences and perspectives on life. But at the end of the day, you're kind of the master of the ship. And so with each podcast or content that you listen to, it's kind of like a bristling of the sail one direction, maybe another. But ultimately, you are in charge. You have the rudder. And you have to decide what that path looks like for you. This has been John Nada, and these are the Days of Thunder.